No, we're just. You better hurry. All right, I'm only going to do one of these sheets. I don't think we're going to have enough people. Henrik asked me to send him the diff, so I did. Let's see what he does. That's correct.
What's the magic for getting it to swap from the display besides this?
I haven't used my new release yet, so I don't know the answer to that question.
So, Adam, what's the magic in PowerPoint to get it to decide that the presentation display is the other display?
Extend? Under what?
No.
No, it's a Mac. I was like, what are you talking about?
Here, I'll show you the problem. That's the problem. Oh, there it is.
Oh, that isn't bad.
I just couldn't see it up here from the shallow angle. Thank you. We're a little past our start time. We'll give it a couple of minutes for people to finish filtering in. We'll start at 5 after. Russ. When we start,
Yeah,
you do that.
sure. Make sure I have the title of this on. Yeah. From the front. Are you ready? Sure.
All right, we'd like to go ahead and get started.
So, Alyssa, would you come up, please? Before we get started with the agenda bashing, we're going to outgoing AD bash first. So, we got Alyssa. We got Alyssa a copy of Bob Marley's Legend album because it has on it the Stir It Up song.
This is another one that I'm going to miss a lot. This group, we've had so many fun and glorious times. But I guess one thing that we didn't put in the mail was that I am going to continue shepherding documents that I already have that are in ISG evaluation or in the RFC editor's queue. So I will still be dealing with those, and then Adam is taking over for the rest. Thanks.
Thanks for saving us the context pass.
So Pete Resnick has agreed to take notes for this session. Thank Pete. Would like to get a volunteer for a JabberScribe right quick. Thank you, Cullen. Welcome to an IETF STIR meeting. The meeting is held under the provisions of the Note Well. If you're not familiar with the Note Well, become familiar with it before you come to the mic. Our agenda today is much shorter than our allotted time. Like about 7 other working groups, we ended up with an hour more than we asked for. I do not expect that we will use it. In fact, several of us have made plans to use that hour a different way. We're going to start off with our discussions about our documents in flight, then talk about managing certificate freshness, and then we will begin the flogging on trying to move out of band forward. So with that, do we have any last minute bashes to the agenda, requests for change? So John, if you go ahead and come up.
In the last 2 days, there's been a little bit of a discussion of STIR certificates.
Yeah, there's like 50 STIR certificate slides in here, actually.
Okay,
It
thank
says
you.
it's just 4474 BIS.
So, but not the freshness part, just the.
Yep, there is,
No, no,
yeah.
my point is on the call or on the list is about the document that's waiting on Alexi to clear.
Oh, well, Alexi cleared, I think.
Yeah, but one of them actually needs a fix.
It doesn't, so I have that thing on
Okay.
my slide, I promise.
Thank you.
Get my water. Oh, I have a slide shifter. I can either instruct. Yeah. Okay, sure. So I'm John. We're going to be talking today about the 3 documents that are pretty much done at this point, thankfully. That's RFC 4474 BIS, Passport, and then certs. RFC 44 BIS and Passport, they kind of are the over-the-wire, bits-on-the-wire component of STIR, and certs is what we think we need to do to try to articulate how the protocol interacts with trust anchors and so on. Next slide. The good news is I think we're pretty much done with these things in the sense that, you know, we've been working on them for a long time. We did a working group last call. We got them through the ISG, and now all the ballot positions are clear. There's still a little bit of cleanup to do, and some of that cleanup is actually on certs, on the certs draft. So we're going to talk a bit about that, but basically this is at a point now where we can pull the trigger and release these when we feel like it. We're just going to hold certs at least for a little bit to make sure that we get this stuff taken care of. Last minute fixes. Yeah, so, you know, because Chris and I were doing this separately, and then Sean was doing some passes of STIR certs, and I was at 4474 BIS, we had a couple of synchronization problems across the drafts. Sure. So one of the main synchronization problems we found anyway was just about the bare syntax, especially the way that we were talking about telephone numbers. The last thing we wanted to do when we embarked on this mission was to come up with like yet another syntax for telephone numbers. And that's part of the reason why 4474 BIS took this approach of doing canonicalization instead. We basically just said, we're going to have a process that you can use to turn telephone numbers as they are rendered through formats like RFC89-66, the tele-URL format that's commonly used for SIP as well, into something that will look clean and will probably end up resolving to the same base string of numbers, no matter who is looking at what the original turned out to be. So anyway, one of the things we've come up with on this that has been on the list recently is this question of whether or not TNs can include pound or star. And this is something where we had it one way in one draft, another way in another draft, so we needed to get that fundamentally synchronized. But this only even came into this because in addition to canonicalizing the from, that is the calling party number, we were also canonicalizing the from, or the called party number. And the called party number in a lot of instances can end up with markup like this that's messy, and like actually discarding that markup discards semantics that you want to preserve. And so it's really because of that, kind of corner case that we ended up eventually saying, okay, like we'll have that be part of what we capture in the search document as well. I don't know, is Mr. Hammer in the Jabber room, or he's not in the room, is he? I think I see him there. I've known Mike for a long time. I know he knows his numbers. I think what we've got, so Russ, from your interaction with him, so what do you think we need to tweak on this?
I guess we went through working group last call. We've now gone through IETF last call with the pound and the star included, even though range, when you have a number that has a pound or a star in it, you say, and 19 consecutive numbers following it doesn't necessarily make sense. I don't think the certificate issuer is going to do that.
Right. So this is why I brought up the distinction between what is in the to and what's in the from.
Correct.
See, we're really going to be talking about ranges of numbers in these certificates when we're attesting, authority for what would be signed in the from, right?
But that is the comment that was received yesterday.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's okay.
I think we just have to trust the certificate issuers not to do that. Otherwise, we have to have different ASN one for the two places.
Yeah.
That's the choice.
Like I said, I think it's okay. Like again, the corner of a corner case, like deep down in this, we're doing this like diversion stuff that I've been looking at. I can maybe see cases where that would interact with this. So, I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. But at the same time, I think it is a sense, you could do reasonable things with this that would not run afoul of it. CA policies.
So does anyone think we need to take the step to define in range a number that does not include star and pound? Let's just be
Okay.
All right, so no one raised their hands, and would the minute taker make sure that is included?
Thanks. We did a few other things I think we did right that are probably good, like getting the syntax for passport claims. Chris and I had an exchange for whether that should be ASCII or UTF-8, and it's kind of confusing because, of course, we're inheriting all this from JWT and passport. JWT is in turn inheriting this from JWS, and when you follow, it's like turtles all the way down. They can't even find where anybody to find the semantics of this other than to say that JSON generally could be UTF-8 or UTF-16 or UTF-32. And so basically we said, okay, fine, we'll put a restriction in this. Like when you're registering claims for passport, they got to be like ASCII, right? And this is not an unreasonable, like everything that is in the JWT registry already is within the ASCII range. Again, except for some like internationalization cases where people wanted to have really weird claim names for that, I guess I could conceivably imagine it, but it's really more the values, I think, than the claim names that need to have that, the UTF, whatever in it. So we just put that constraint in. It's just ASCII. Oh, Mr. Shad, do you have a concern with this? Okay.
Jim Schott. Are we talking just the tag, or are we talking the value as well?
Just the tag. Obviously, I think the value needs to be internationalizable, yeah. So we're just saying it's basically like an IANA constraint for us. When you're registering the tag name for the claim name, we want you to do that with ASCII for this. That's it. Yeah, emoticons and this, yeah, thumbs up. Pizza. Yeah. Anyway, we also tried to fix the date text a bit more about how we interact with the IAT in passport versus the date in the SIP header. That was a comment that Ben, I think, made about this that we wanted to get cleaned up. And also Ben was concerned, I think justifiably, that it sounded too much like we were trying to standardize reason phrases. We kind of had some text in there that was too strong, so we rolled that back a bit. But the stuff that we did in response to ISG, most of it was like small stuff like this. But now we're going to get into some of the more substantial issues. I just want to make sure everybody here is aware of before we go forward and pull the trigger on this. So next slide. Okay. Yeah, this now works. Okay. This is an interesting one. So this might require a little bit of a backstory. So a little ways back, we thought we were going to have a level of assurance indicator that was going to be in the cert itself. That kind of gave a sense to you of how high the confidence was in the attestation of authority, control, assignment, whatever you want to call it. And none of these words are perfect, right? But whatever the relationship is that we're binding these telephone network resources to these certificates, we thought it might be handy to have like a level of assurance, which is something Addis was interested in. When Addis decided to migrate that to a claim in Passport, instead of actually having it in cert, we still thought it would be useful in the cert to be able to provide a feature that would let you say passports that are signed by this cert are constrained to only sign like for this level of assurance, for example. So if we imagine that there is an LOA claim that's called, that appears in Passport, just called LOA, and that LOA can have 3 values, high, medium, or low. Just pulling this out of a hat. Chris, I'm sure, could articulate what you're actually doing. We could then put this thing we call the JWT claim constraint into the cert that would say, for passports signed by this cert, if there is a claim of value confidence, it has to be low, right? And this would be something the CA could kind of levy on the certs that were issued to make, and this would depend on, again, who you were issuing the certs to and what role they had in the network. But we wanted to turn this into a generic capability because we thought, that's useful for this, but I could also imagine, let's say we're doing something like CNAM, and I wanted to be able to issue you a cert, and let's imagine it's an individual TN cert. I know there are people in this room that believe that there is no such animal, this is a unicorn, but let's assume that it exists for the moment. If I issue you an end user cert and it has this CNAM claim that's supposed to represent the color name, I could put one of these JWT claim constraints in that says, if Sean Turner is going to sign any passports with this, if CNAM is present, it must have the value Sean Turner, this string. So that's basically the concept behind this. Russ was kind enough to patch this up for us. We ran into a couple of problems with this actually in ISD review. One of them was that we kind of first phrased it like it was both a blacklist and a whitelist. Like, okay, we're going to phrase this so, if when we issue a cert, we can list here's the things that you're allowed to use and here's the things you're not allowed to use. Well, it turns out that having both a whitelist and a bad list ruins all these good like additive permissions properties we tend to like in designing security systems like this. So we devolved it down to something that is merely a whitelist. In other words, if JWT claim constraints is present, and if it's not, then there are no constraints. You can put whatever claims in you want. But if it's present, then you are restricted to using just the set of claims that it specifies. Now, of course, we do assume that all of the baseline claims that are defined in the passport specification are automatically whitelisted. So this is really for extensions like CNAM, things like that. That's the model we ended up with. I think this works. Sean and I had like a bad merge in the 13 that came out. So we put in a that still had some exclude text in it. So we actually managed to tear all that out now in the version we just issued this week. I think this should be clean. Is it exactly right yet? So there's one last thing I want to talk about here, and people feel free to opine on this. So the way the text reads now, when you define a JWT claim constraint, you end up defining, like I said, both the claim name for this claim name, like CNAM, you must have this value, right, assigned for it. Something like, for CNAM, it has to be Sean Turner. It strikes me it could also be useful to have a JWT claim constraint that merely authorizes the use of a particular claim without stipulating any value for it. So in other words, maybe I want to let you use CNAMs when you sign with this cert, right? And I don't care what CNAM value you put in because you're like Cullen, right? You're an enterprise and you've got like 10,000, numbers that you can sign for there. And you might want to have different CNAMs for different ones of those. I don't want to have to give you 10,000 different certs for these CNAMs. I just want to say, anything that Cullen's enterprise is signing, they can put whatever CNAM they want in it. The syntax state doesn't actually allow that. So what we could do, Russ, I'm sure you know how to do this. Can we make it so that the value part of this is actually optional, right? That when you define JWT claim constraint, you have to say what the claim is. That's like mandatory for it. But the value part is something that we either can include or not.
So the way it's defined right now, if the extension is not there, you're not constrained in any way.
Right.
Second thing is, if you put a constraint in, you're providing a list of values that the field may contain. Yep. So in like the example that's in the document is confidence, which, was allowed to have high, medium, low, you could tell that particular issuer must use low, that issuer of JWTs must include, high, so that you're only authorizing them to issue tokens with high. So that's the current approach. If you were to, there is no mechanism to say you must include a JWT of a particular claim.
Yeah, I don't think we need that.
And there's no mechanism that says you may include, because the lack of a constraint already says you may include it.
Right. So that the one, again, maybe it's a corner case I'm looking at here, is the one where there is a claim. I want to allow the signer to sign for passports that have this claim in it, but I don't necessarily want to say that there are specific values I know about beforehand you have to attach to it.
No constraint gives you that already.
Well, not necessarily, no, because it could be, for example, I want to give Cullen like something that lets him do CNAMs, but I want to, for somebody else, have them not be able to do CNAMs at all.
We do not have a mechanism that does that.
Actually, we must have a
We
mechanism
do
that does
not.
that. I can tell you how to do that myself. I can put null as my JWT claim constraint and say that's the only claim that you're allowed to use is null, and therefore you can't use CNAM or divert or anything else. But I mean, that is a hack. There's a workaround. But I mean, the point is putting one. If we just put one thing into the claim constraints field, necessarily you can't do any of the other claims, right?
No, you're not saying anything about the other claims.
But it's supposed to be a whitelist, right? In the sense of
No, it's a whitelist of values. It has
Okay.
nothing about
Right.
names of claims that are not listed.
okay. So we need to we need
Right.
to
So
shop
if
this.
you have, if that is a requirement, this document doesn't do it.
I suspect that's a requirement, but Chris?
Can I make
Yeah.
a comment?
Yeah.
Chris went, for shaken, we would need that for specifically orange ID, which we
Yeah.
cannot determine a priori what the value would be.
Yeah.
You could make the argument for a test that you could say it's one of three values, but
Well, so I think probably for a Ridge
so if we were going to
ID,
use this mechanism.
So do you want to mandate the inclusion of a claim of that name?
I think we would, yes.
Mandate, right? Any claim that doesn't contain,
It would be like if you were to use the shaken extension, you must have an attest and orange ID claims, set of claims.
so when we spoke at SIPIT, that wasn't a requirement.
well,
That's-
but the point is
But it is
you
now.
have a whole
We-
separate
we-
profile,
we-
Chris. Like
we
you,
don't have to use this
Right.
mechanism, but
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
so this is,
I mean, Chris, you have a whole separate profile, right? For Shaken, you can just say this is required for use with Shaken, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have a whole separate layer that
True.
like plugs in on top of all this, right? So I mean,
True.
true,
but you can't mechanically
no.
restrict that, right?
So so like I said, I think we don't quite have this yet, I suspect. So let's talk about this a little more.
Just as note taker, so I understand what I've just written down.
Yeah.
I'm hearing Russ also say this really can't be used as a whitelist in the way in which you were envisioning it, because you can't say constrain it to this and no others.
that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, the value of that, again, because we can't anticipate possible extensions, we wanted to have something that looked more like an additive model. What we want to avoid is a model where, well, I guess we want to create a model where CAs can ultimately deal with entities that are generating certs for that they want to disempower in some crucial ways because they think they have a different status in the network, right? And we need to have, I think, a flexible tool, as unfortunate as it may be, for disempowering people. Henning.
Henning, this is, since I don't understand fully the constraints and the syntax, is there a way to do wildcarding on the value?
Not right now, no.
Right now, by not constraining it is wildcarding.
Right, but I mean, if you wanted to say, you have to have this tag, but you can use any value. If you could put a value, the star,
Oh,
whatever.
sure,
in
sure.
it,
Right, that's all I'm saying, right, yes,
Yeah,
we would add
and-
something like that.
But it's a special case. You can't, it would be whatever machinery you would have to crank would be stir specific, but I suspect that's unavoidable anyway. I don't think you're going to crank, put that into some generic. So is that?
That would
Is
work.
that allowable
No.
in by,
I'm sure there's some way to do this
is
in,
there, I mean, is there some
ASN.1.
version of the equivalent of what you have in wildcard certificates? Main names, where you also have some version of that.
yeah, I mean, there must be a way in ASN.1 to just say
So
this belongs to everything.
would a list of claims of a particular name or list of names must be included? Is that adequate if then you also have the current mechanism which says if this claim is present, it must be one of the following values?
Probably, I mean, it feels like we should be able to collapse those into one mechanism rather than having like two separate lists.
No, that would be in the same extension. They'd just be separate fields. I know how to do that with a one-line change.
Well, if you know how to do it with one line change, Russ, then I think we're done.
Okay.
That's it. It sounds to me like that, as long as it doesn't make the certs bigger in a way that's annoying, we do want to keep these things real small.
I'm sorry. How about I write up a slide?
Just write up a quick slide for this. Yeah, thanks.
Chris went. So are you referring, so I'm trying to think of an example here. Base claims can be covered as well, right? So like, for example, telephone number would be,
Well, so we have Orig and Dest all are automatically
but do we
whitelisted.
have the policy part covering that, the policy OID? Or no?
How so?
That's not that's not intended. This is only for
It would-
extension claims?
It's only for extension claims.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Well, or we could include it's however we describe it, but the base three should be there, right?
I mean,
You can't exclude one of them.
TN auth list, right, provides the property already. This is the telephone number for which.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, think about it, it's like similar to that, right?
Yeah.
We're just trying to find ways that we can, a flexible, extensible mechanism we can use to say, we want to put other restrictions on what passports signed by this certificate are allowed to attest. So it's very similar to, TN was kind of our starting case for this, right? This is a attempt to genericize that.
Yeah. I mean, to me, unfortunately, I didn't catch that, and I was imagining this to be more of a, you must have these claims type of mechanism.
Okay, well,
Never said that.
we can put that specific line in, that
I'm
sounds
okay
like.
with
and then-
having both there, but I'm
Okay.
trying to think of good examples of the former rather than what we're talking about.
Well, so the former again would be things like LOA. Like I said, right, where if LOA is going to be present, you can only issue LOAs of low. Yeah, remember, that's where we started on this, right? So this was the attempt to take that and turn it into something that would be useful for other extensions we would be anticipating other than LOA. Yes.
And I'm still not quite clear. You mentioned the CNAM example as one possible one where you want to enforce that in this particular subcase, the way I understand the requirement is you want to enforce a claim for CNAM, but you obviously don't know because of the corporate example exactly which value this thing is going to have. It's just not possible. What is the value of having a claim that essentially can be in practice? And that's what I'm still trying to understand.
Well, so
Given that you can probably put some kind of, I don't know, in many of these fields too.
I think that
Like an empty CNAM or something like that.
Yeah, I think you have to imagine, again, an instance where something more like an enterprise, right, where you're delegating, if you're a carrier, I have a business relationship with, Cullen's Enterprise. And so if Cullen's Enterprise starts emitting bizarre CNAMEs, like our business relationship compensates that, right, in some way. But I've explicitly delegated the authority for selecting that to Cullen. But I don't want to do that for Adam, because I don't trust Adam, right? So when I issue Adam certs, I want the certs to say he can't do CNAM and put any values in that.
So this
But
is really
Cullen-
what should be important distinction here, because it is white, let's see if I summarize this correctly, because it's a whitelist only model. If you don't want to do anything you want model, you put yourself, we have to enumerate the explicitly,
Yep.
which now means we have to be able to do that.
Understood.
Both, I'm just trying to see, because I think I've certainly lost kind of, the weeds are kind of overgrowing my
Sure,
understanding.
okay.
So again, the question is, why wouldn't a wildcard for the value in that case work?
I mean, again, this is purely semantic or syntactical question about how we do this in ASN.1. Russ is the expert in
Put a
that.
star in it.
Yeah, okay. If you can put a star in it and that works in ASN.1, then I think we're done. That's just, I think Russ is our expert on that.
Regex in there, but-
You're right. Russ is our expert on this. Whatever Russ says is the right way syntactically to do that in ASN.1, we're going to do it that way. I don't know myself. All right, so I think we've talked about this. I think we have a plan. I think we could probably move on to another slide. Oh, I have the thing. I've had the thing so long, I haven't used it yet. I put it somewhere. This looks like it. Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah, so this is another issue that was non-trivial that we dealt with. And Adam, thank you very much for actually taking the time to read 4916, the connected identity document, and compare it to what we were doing in Passport and in RFC 4474 BIS. We knew that there might be some interaction here. Over in the SIP Randy working group, which is not meeting this week, we actually need to use connected identity because we want to have both of the endpoints of a call be acting as the authentication service and verification service roles of RFC 4474 BIS. And that does require connected identity to work for reasons I can get into that are kind of complicated. But Adam rightly pointed out that this led to necessarily some fixes we needed to the text about retransmissions that's in 4474 BIS, the notion that you could retry a request that had failed. I think this is a somewhat useful property. I think we originally decided we wanted to do this when the earliest networks that we tried to send any of these sign requests through bounced it because the date was being rewritten. And so we said, okay, well, what we'd like to be able to do then is to move from the compact form of Passport to the full form of Passport in those instances so that the date can be recovered from IET by the relying party. And that led to us introducing all this text about ways to do retrying and retransmission and repairable errors. All that is really good. The text gets complicated, though, because of the precise ways that SIP does loop detection and, moreover, detects this condition called spirals when you do sequential forking, when kind of things go through proxy servers and end up looping back to and go somewhere else. We've done a ton of work in SIP to try to fix that over the years. There are other RFCs where we've addressed this behavior. And so basically what I did is added some 4474 BIS text that said, pay attention to that. Here's the places where you can run into this. There is a should in 3261 in particular that we're kind of overriding in this and saying, okay, in this instance, you probably don't have to do what that should says because otherwise you might think this is a loop when it's not. There really is, it's kind of down in the weeds what that is. So I'd say read the text if you're interested. It's all in those sections about retransmission and authentication service and verification service behavior. But again, thanks to Adam for pointing this out. Adam, you feel like we've got this okay?
I haven't had a chance to use the slide document, but the
discussion went where you wanted it to? Okay. Yeah, I think we got this one. I think we got it. And if we didn't, we'll fix it in all 48 at this point. Next. That's all done, I think, right? I mean, for RFC 4474 BIS and Passport, I think we're stable with those tweaks, which is good. Some of the tweaks, again, and we had to change things in stir certs for them as well. So those are really good to go at this point, I think. Now, for stir certs, there's more maybe than just tweaks. Let's talk about what we did there a little bit. On the next slide. I was going to do these all as like separate PowerPoints originally, but then I just was like, I read the agenda and realized it was just going to be me, so just one PowerPoint. Next slide. So this document got some attention in ISG review from folks like Steve Farrell, Surly professor at Trinity College or something. I think we have those blocking points now resolved, and actually made some very good points. These are important things for us to address and fix in this. There is one thing still outstanding. Ecker wants to have some better text in there about T and range arithmetic boundaries. He has sent me that text, and we will get it into a 14 or do it in a 48. It's just like a one sentence tweak that we need. But there are some other major changes that are still warrant some review and discussion. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this in the past like 4 months. I'm looking at you like Mary over there, you Addis people. All this like OCNs, SPIDs, alt SPIDs, lats faults. Yes, so we kind of, you know, as Addis figured out, and this is your problem, right? Like what an OCN is. Like, these are all identifiers that are specific to the telephone network that you use to identify who carriers are. They're not IETF identifiers, and there's this organization called NICA, right? The carrier group that, yeah, NECA that does this. They assign them, and their format is defined, these Addis specifications, and like, they're really important though for us in the sense that we do want to be able to have basically the subject of a certificate that we issue for this be the carriers, an identifier for the carrier that is responsible. And we went through a million iterations of this trying to figure out what the right way to do that was. We eventually lighted on OCNs, but then people started asking harder questions. Well, okay, that works for like North America, right? But like, what do you actually do for this, you know, in Europe? What do you do for this in like Asia Pacific? And after like a lot of going around that particular maypole, yeah, we've introduced a new concept that's called service provider codes. This came out of Addis. Basically, this is just like a ASCII string, and we assume probably for the shaken profile that it will conform to OCNs and look a lot like OCNs do. But we want to leave the door open to other profiles of SIP or other profiles of STIR that are going to use these identifiers to specify something else. So it's a bit of a blank check in the sense we really are saying somebody else has to do the work for this. But we left in some text indicating it's probably something like OCNs that we're dealing with. Yes, Henning.
So, Henning, one of the questions, and it may just not be an issue, if the profile implicitly says, let's assume, based on the old ITU document, nobody except the US and maybe one has a completely functional system except in the mobile space. So
Yeah,
the mobile space is international. We know how to deal with that. That's not an issue. But in the landline space, just nothing seems to have happened.
Yeah.
So there are two issues. Namely, one is there ever a possibility, because it is not described that this is an OCN, that you wander into whatever Canadian or Mexican territory accidentally, and now what you thought was a NECA OCN is now something else, something you don't recognize, but it is when you look at this and says, I think this is a whatever Italian carrier code, and no, it's not. It's an OCN, but I don't know that.
Yeah. So I think there is an answer to that. That's a pretty good one, actually. Which is, again, all these regions have they're going to have their own specific trust anchors that issue and attest these things. In other words, things that NECA attests, and maybe some surrogate entity actually
defined by the trust anchor.
It's defined by the trust anchor. And so when you go to whatever other country, even if they happen to use identifiers that look a lot like ours, right, then they'll have a different trust anchor that's on.
I think that should be documented, just so that because again, if you have a string that is otherwise undefined, it's always good to know what the namespace is.
Got it. Yeah, I can do that.
And the second one is, and that goes back to the mobile one, should we worry about that namespace?
I mean, ideally.
Because, I mean, again, because that is probably the closest we have to an international namespace, and as the old document said, is actually the pseudo carriers that don't actually have wireless operations getting these ones because it's the best they can do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I don't think we need to worry about it now, but at some point, I suspect that is actually a very helpful thing, particularly because of wireless roaming and other things that are happening where I want to be able to do that.
I guess as 3GPP picks this up, obviously, which I understand they are, I'd be happy to work with them to make sure that, I mean, the only thing, and maybe Krister, you know, right? I mean, are we going to run afoul of anything by making it just ASCII, right? I mean, is there anything that would be in that identifier space that we're not thinking of, right? That might be outside that you don't think so? Yeah, I doubt it too. So again, I making it just ASCII, I assume, and relatively unbounded. Yeah.
That's a practical problem. Yeah. The only one that I can think of is, again, in the North American space, because you have the wireless world and the wired world, is if we ever get to the mobile carrier code for that, it's They probably are syntactically distinguishable, but it seems like a bad idea to look at the number of characters in the string to decide whether this is
Again, but I
CCC or not.
I think the GSMA or whoever, right, will be signing for the, you know, the mobile codes for that, right? And there will be some different entity that is the trust anchor for it. I think that has to be the differentiator. But you're right to point out we should put that in the spec. So, yeah.
Mary Barnes. So the service provider code concept came out of Addis, and that's because even within Addis, we actually couldn't agree on this point
I know.
that it's an OCN for North America even, right? Because
Oh, really?
there's-
So even, I shouldn't
Well,
even say that. Are you kidding me? Really?
No, I'm not kidding you. I'm actually, I'm not. I'm serious because there were people that said company code is the ultimate authority and it depends upon which Addis document you're using and which taxonomy and which organization is managing the things,
Well,
right?
this isn't in the spec, right? So
Okay,
this is just,
that's
this is
good.
also
I'm
my
saying,
slide,
I
yeah.
think we really want to say very little in the IETF specs. It needs to be, I think ASCII string is sufficient, and this
Okay.
very generic term is all that you need, and it needs to move up some layers away from IETF in terms of
Oh,
what
I
that really
agree.
looks
This,
like. Okay.
we have no business being in this, man. This is all on you guys.
Right. So,
Fine with me. Anything else about this one? And the sooner I can get rid of this one, the happier I'll be. I'm just trying to get out of everybody else's way on this. So, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
John, I'm going to drop the slides for a second to repair a problem.
Okay. We're gonna drop the slides for a second to repair a problem. During that time, I'll do a little bit of juggling. Or
Sorry about that.
that's fine. I'm sure I could look at what my next slide is, and we could start talking about it anyway. Yeah, so after this, we get into the hard one, which is freshness, certificate freshness. A lot of, oh, we could just, was that some Bob Marley already coming in? Is that being streamed already? WebRTC? Yeah, right. Yeah, not today, no. So a lot of the concerns that we've heard about certificate freshness in particular here are about the data that we're potentially revealing when we perform real-time status checks associated with certificates. And Stephen had a number of points of discussion about this, but the main one was OCSP, and I'll have some diagrams to explain OCSP in a bit. It's a protocol to use kind of in real time if you're a relying party to be able to verify that a certificate is still valid when you get it. Of course, certificates can get compromised, or like all these things can happen to them. And because we are doing things with TNs that are kind of fancy, telephone numbers, we made some further tweaks to OCSP. And unfortunately, I mean, those tweaks do make the information that OCSP reveals more interesting, especially to the per-pass actors, as we call them, to pervasive monitoring systems. There's kind of eavesdropping on the internet. You can gather a lot of metadata from it. And although there's some text about using OCSP with confidentiality, like you can apparently do it over HTTP and thus do it over TLS, that might help a bit. There's still a ton of metadata that's revealed by that itself. So we can and should do better. Next slide. But you know, I really don't know that we know how to yet. And so after a lot of deliberation, what we've basically done is punted this. The text about freshness, we have a little bit of discussion in there about here's approaches. It's important to do it. But I don't think we're ready yet without some operational experience and maybe some further thinking about it to stipulate that any one true way to do this anyway. So this is by far the largest change to the STIR shorts document that came out of ISG review. We removed a lot of text that used to be in there that explained exactly how you do with this with OCSP, and that's now all in a separate document we're going to talk about. But you know, people should know that. People should be cool with that. If people think is desperately important that we deal with certificate freshness at this stage, you know, I am going to make an argument that I think certificate freshness matters. I don't think it matters so much we can't go forward with the STIR sorts document without it, though. I mean, I think this really is something that we can go out and do some useful implementation work, even if we don't quite understand this perfectly yet. So, provided no one in here is going to get up and cry and say that if we don't get this right now, we shouldn't proceed. That is our plan. We did as well leave in this approach of providing a TN auth list by reference instead of doing it by value within the cert. And that actually gives you a lot of the same properties of this freshness. In other words, you get a cert, and rather than having like this literal block that says, okay, these are the SPCs for which the cert is valid, you could instead have a just a URL, right? That will be signed by the CA, so you know it's a good URL, and there'll be an HTTPS URL, so you know that everything is properly secured for you to know you're talking the right place. And when you do reference that, you will get this TN auth list object back from it. And so if you'll be getting the fresh version of it, right? Now, unfortunately, that has exactly these kinds of properties that in some ways Stephen is worried about, because the relying party is the one that'll be doing this, and it'll reveal some metadata kind of about who is receiving calls and who they're talking to because of it. Depending on exactly how this is architected, there still is useful metadata that can be mined from that. So we left that in. Maybe it's better, I don't really know, but everything else has now been punted out. And we're going to talk about those punted approaches now. I think. Good. Yeah. So we have 2 new documents. That's always fun, right? Just when we thought we were done, we have 2 more certs-related documents. So I mean, the most important thing, I guess, to communicate about why we're in this predicament and why freshness is important for STIR is the idea that once we started talking about TNs themselves being effectively the subject of certificates, and especially ranges, blocks of TNs, suddenly you enter into a new world where it really matters to relying parties whether or not a cert is valid for a particular TN. And we've, since the start of this, kind of agonized over this and approached it in a bunch of different ways, how we kind of resolve the problem of when you're a relying party and you receive a call, it's been signed for a particular TN, and this doesn't apply so much, I think, to the SPC side of this. How do I know in real time whether or not that number has been ported or whether there has been some other structural change that I need to be aware of? And that it requires some either means of expiry or some means of real-time status verification that is going to let you know that the telephone number is still within the scope of the authority for that certificate. And again, if you're only doing SPCs, and Addis for the moment is only going to do SPCs, I think. Should you then not care about this? Can you guys all go to sleep during this? Well, let me try to convince you not, because some of the approaches to this actually, I think, have interesting properties, and you may still care about them. Next slide. So there are a bunch of ways we can enumerate to approach certificate freshness that are familiar in the industry. There are things like CRLs. There's protocols like SCVP, which is not used at all, I think. If you want to talk about CRLs and way to approach this with CRLs, you're welcome to write a draft. But I think the main approaches I'm interested in focusing on anyway are just OCSP and short-lived certs. Initially, we'd say these have very different kind of privacy properties, kind of to Stephen's point. But actually, I think once we delve in and look at them a bit more, there are ways to skin both of them that sort of look very, very similar in terms of what information they leak and how that all comes together. I don't have, I think, a strong preference myself for either of these yet, so I'm not here to give you a recommendation. Actually, I think what I'm here to say is we probably need to go down both these paths a little bit more and actually do some specification work and understand them a bit more before I'd be prepared to make a recommendation, and definitely want to see this get out in the field and people do something with it before we make a recommendation around either of these. Next. So, I mean, the classic real-time credential validation story looks something like this. And this is my typical STIR in-band picture where there are signers there at that intermediary. You can imagine that intermediary on the left is an authentication service. It is ultimately going to emit signed requests that have the headers from RFC 4474 bits and passports inside of them. And then when those requests make it down to the verification service or potentially to endpoints, there's going to be this step of credential validation that's going to occur. You don't like the term validation?
No, I don't like the term real time.
Okay, real time. Very good. Okay. It is happening at the time that SIP requests are landing. I have a separate picture for stapling, if that's what you're going to say.
That's great. I was just going to get it on the record. In the web, we've tried this, and it was not suitable for real time. So it's not done real time.
Okay. Fair enough. The idea is, anyway,
maybe you can make OCSP servers that are awesome enough to do real-time validation, but
Can you elaborate this? Because I'm not getting what your actual point is.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so like in the web, you do an HTTPS connection, and you really would like to check whether the cert's been revoked before you accept the TLS connection. To do that check, you call out to the CA's OCSP server, and you're blocking that TLS connection and the HTTPS request while that OCSP connection goes on. And I can get the Firefox stats, but like these things fail like some double-digit % of the time.
Sure.
And they time out after multiple seconds, and like
Sure.
OCSP is just awful. Like the web PKI infrastructure has not been able to deploy OCSP servers that are sufficiently performant to do real-time validation in this stuff.
Okay.
So like if you have tolerances and you can build your OCSP infrastructure good enough, like maybe this is in principle workable, but in practice it is not workable.
But you'll at least agree this is the picture, at least the intended architecture for OCSP and how it is supposed to work with this. Yes, I'm going to show the stapling architecture in like 2 slides. This is the classic notion of how this stuff is supposed to work, right? The relying parties, when they receive requests, in this case signed requests, they go out and check in real time, hey, got this request signed by the cert. In our case, we've added the wrinkle of TNs to it, right? So they say, okay, I got this request for this calling party number, and I'm going to look and see at the cert and say, okay, is that telephone number in the scope of authority of the cert that's signed for it? And you do this kind of as a dip at this point. Yes, I think so.
So, your comment a little bit is in a different realm. We have a slightly related problem, namely for robocall permissions. Namely, there is a big problem that legitimate mass callers, think bank, credit card, electric utilities, that want to tell you that unless you pay up, your lights are going to go out, that type of stuff. They have a problem that people give permission to be called. At some point, they change their phone number, they drop their prepaid calling plan, whatever it happens to be, and then they call, and then the unwitting next holder of that number gets really upset because they get this call. And so there is a emerging and some existing real-time infrastructure that is essentially pub/sub, what we would call pub/sub, that essentially tells people when was the last instant that this number was reassigned to somebody else. It doesn't say who has it, it just simply says there was a transfer of entity, CNUM in effect, to that number. So I wonder if in practice, for carrier-based validation, it doesn't work for, so that information is available to mass callers, obviously, and carriers. They have it directly. There's apparently a consortium of entities, of major carriers that do that. Might not aggregate that data. And that. So I wonder if in practice what people will do is something much simpler. They'll look at that data. Was there a change? Since the most likely one is porting, which is exactly what is, and say this was ordered to a different entity, not just a different carrier. Because I think we've discussed that the carrier port, given the trust model that we have, is not our high priority event, in the sense that in the unlikely event that the losing carrier assigns for a number, that is almost invariably going to be a mistake, but not malicious for any number of reasons.
It's unlikely to actually affect our threat model of preventing impersonation for robocalling and blah, blah, blah. Yes.
And so the more likely case is that the number has been completely reassigned to somebody else, and you don't want to have that happen. Some entity that is not in the same category as the other one. Even there, I have my doubts that there's actually even matter in practice, but leaving that aside. So I wonder if in practice what will people do is not OCSP or revocation loss. They'll simply do if this number has changed since the certificate has been issued, if it's a per number certificate, then something is amiss.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I think it has a lot of the same properties, right, as the CRL would, in the sense of, and there are people who push CRLs. I mean, look at the way Chrome, instead of OCSP, right, effectively, they just constantly push updates of CRL like it's a pub/sub. And
But
so, I
we're
mean,
already
yeah.
doing it in a sense, the additional overhead is
Mhm.
zero because we already have that data.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just not, given the difficulties, I'm all for punting.
yeah, so we punted.
When that's.
We have punted. We're now talking about which,
I'm just curious as whether we'll find ourselves in the case that this is going to be one of these things that nobody ever uses, simply because it's not a big problem in practice for the time being, at least, namely until our signing model changes dramatically, namely until you have per user signing, then I think we'll get into a different model.
well, I think I'm 100% in agreement, but let me talk about short-lived certs because they also have side effect properties that I think are significant that are different from this. So, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say I don't think we need to be concerned about freshness because of that, because again, I think if we look at the short-lived certs approach, when I get to that in a couple slides, we'll talk about properties it has, I think are also useful for reasons that are not covered by that.
And so, I mean, one thing, and this is an inherent one, going back to your original concern, namely the privacy issue, is that if you can get to a model that is conceptually similar to essentially kind of a pub sub COL or something like that, that avoids many of these privacy issues because it removes, there's no call information at that point. It is simply a, whoever had it, the number no longer does, which tells you essentially nothing.
Yep.
And because they could be doing all kinds of things. And given that we operate in an environment which is different than the web environment, namely the number of verifying parties is orders of magnitude smaller. We don't have browsers doing that at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, we do want this to work for WebRTC and so on.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, for the next year, 5-year type of time frame, is the validation at scale will happen where you care about reliability and real time and all of these other things where failure is not an option, is, and we operate at 10 milliseconds type of time scales, is that a pub sub model for a COL might actually be by far more effective because it avoids the real-time aspect in it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have a privacy problem. And you already have data. We already have the data.
Yep.
We know the carriers already track this stuff.
Yep. Like I said, I could imagine there being a draft, which I have not written yet, that would be about CRLs for this. Yes, it would work, again, kind of like the Chrome model would for this. And you just assume that because we're creating so much of a new operational environment around this, especially to deploy for Shaken, that, yeah, you could define a centralized kind of CRL push that would probably incorporate not just the data you're referring to, but I imagine some other data as well, that would, just be sent down to the carriers would use it. Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, Chris went, I can't help but bring up distributed registries for.
I know. I was thinking this is a modern use case. This is exactly what I was thinking. I was like, oh, we can have a modern system that like spread this stuff around. Yes.
But no, I think what you're going to get to, and that's why I'll keep my comments short, is short-lived. So
I'm going to get to short-lived.
Probably a good practical short-term solution because that's, you just do some nice caching, preemptive caching type mechanisms and some stuff like that, and hopefully you have a better chance of scaling this up too. But
yeah,
I'll let you continue.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I might capture that we want to investigate what CRL thing might look like. That might actually be a thing to pun over to modern. We should talk about modern sometime as well here, but not the second. Next slide. Let me just try to go through real quick. I think we probably have already talked about most of this. But I mean, the interesting thing about OCSP is, although it has all these properties originally, where the relying party is the one who has who is actually doing the OCSP diff. Of course, in the web space today, people do a lot of this now with stapling, where instead of the relying party on the terminating side from the OCSP diff, it is in fact performed on the originating side by the signing entity, and that eliminates a lot of the privacy concerns as well, and doesn't require you to take that real-time hit in any place during the call processing, because of course, on the originating side, you can go acquire a staple for any number that you have whenever you want it, whenever you need it. And all that staple has to say is, this is valid for this particular number for which this call is being placed. And because of that, if I'm Cullen and I have my 10,000 numbers in my enterprise, I can just randomly choose the times that I go acquire my staples for these every 3 days or whatever, stagger it out. So there's absolutely no metadata that can usefully be gathered from that other than that, Cullen owns these numbers. And even that we could probably eliminate by just doing this over TLS as well. So one thing I would say about that, if we were going to do that, we would probably actually need a way in SIP to carry the staple, because that's not something we've defined today. So there would be like some amount of new protocol work we would probably need to add a header, I imagine, that would actually carry the staple along with this. We don't have that now. And that might actually be something that's useful to do for SIP in general, or like some other applications too that use certs around SIP. So next slide. What that looks like is much more like this. Like, again, the authentication service side, it goes and just gets its staple. And it's a short-lived thing, right? These staples, you get them to be valid for some very limited period of expiry. And you use that and somehow carry that along with the signed request. And then nothing needs to happen on the terminating side. Nobody takes any performance hits. Privacy problems really seem to go away. Next slide. So short-lived credentials, like short-lived certificates, of course, begin to look exactly like this. Right? And this gets down to the point where we've now skinned like the two approaches to this, and they end up looking more or less identical. Once you're going to do OCSP stapling, pretty much you're doing the same thing you do when you do short-lived certs, which is the authentication service side is going to go out and acquire from the logical authority a short-lived cert, use that in turn to sign the request. It would probably have to then stick that short-lived cert in some fashion into the SIP traffic that goes across. We know how to do that. We have a few different ways of doing that. But then again, the relying parties don't need to then go do any further check with the logical authority when they receive it, because if they trust the trust anchor, then they know that everything is copacetic. Mr. Hoffman.
Paul, so the difference between this slide and the last slide, in fact, is that you have a different party creating the credential. In this one, the person who wrote the cert shortly. In the OCSP stapling model, you usually have an RA or someone else doing it.
You can, yeah.
And so why design in to a protocol an extra party? Asking the web PKI people that, well, historically this, and then business-wise that, stuff like that. If you're starting from scratch, I would think designing a model that had one less party in it would be more stable.
I'm starting to hear people saying they like this short-lived certs idea better than the OCSP idea. Shocker. So next slide. The idea for this is issuing certs for TNs that expire soon. It's probably worth saying what we think short-lived means in this. Again, I think it probably means hours or days, not months or years. Probably we would need to wrap something more specific around that. That would be part of the work that we would do. And I mean, really, this seems like a no-brainer, right? The only hard part of it is figuring out a way for the authentication services to get these certs that they need on a short-lived basis. And historically, it's been hard enough to do certificate enrollment and to actually get certificates provisioned down into the systems that need them. Next slide. But these days, some people are giving this some thought, and we have this this Acme snake oil that Barnes and people like that are selling these days, that all the cool kids are using for things like Let's Encrypt, generating tens of millions of certs, doing this and that. Right. And yeah, I mean, so this is just based on the notion, you kind of think about, like, if you're the authentication service, you're acting as an Acme client, you have like an account with your CA, and the CA knows all of the names for which you are authorized to be issued certificates. And you can, you kind of prove to them how you're authorized to do that. And that could involve NECA if we're talking about the way carriers approach this. And if we're talking about weaker certs that are intended to cater to end users, there could be weaker proofs. We have some preliminary thinking about what some of that might look like that we have begun to circulate. Next slide. The really interesting thing about this approach, I think, is that it's not like just an end user approach. And this is, I think, been the cause of the most confusion when we talk about short-lived certs, we talk about having certs for individual TNs in this. The whole idea behind Acme that you as an administrative entity can have an account, right, with your CA, basically, and have a set of names, right, for which you are authorized to be issued certificates that you can just request as needed, means that even if you're a carrier with millions and millions of numbers under your authority, you can go as you need them and get these short-lived certs for just like one number, like on a per call basis. If that's how you want to do it, right? And so what a cert for an individual TN means is not, this is a cert for an end user. It merely means I don't want to reveal anything else to you other than that this is a cert valid for this one number, right? I don't have to, if I don't feel like revealing my SPCs or anything, I don't have to. And I constantly hear from carriers who are looking at this, man, I really don't want people to be able to do like analytics after the fact, to be able to ascertain like what my number range is and things like that look like. Like this system is designed to provide carriers precisely that property. To give you all the certificate freshness stuff, and at the same time provide this property that you can just on the fly, to the degree that operationally you feel it is necessary to do so, retrieve these disposable instruments that let you, again, avoid all of those sorts of carrier business privacy concerns about your network and your utilization. I think that that's a really useful property even for shaken-like networks. And the fact that it gives you all this freshness kind of stuff straight up, I think this is a really powerful and compelling approach, and I think we should try to build it out a bit and specify it a bit. And it dovetails with other things we want to do with ACME and other things we want to do just that seem to be general security practices that are emerging as best practices today. Next slide. Yeah, Chris.
So maybe I'm asking a question prematurely, but that solves the acquisition part, right? Not necessarily the distribution part.
You mean how people then acquire the certs up here?
I mean, we already talked about some of that with the certs, but
so I think,
unless I'm missing something.
I think that so RC 4474 BIS already has a way to tell you here's the cert I'm using to sign this request. Right. So if you're asking in terms of distribution, how you get the cert to relying parties, it's using the standard mechanisms that are in 4474 BIS. Right. So I think that's pretty, it's unlike OCSP. OCSP, we would actually need to define like a new header. It's like, how do I carry this staple? Right. Or we need to find some capability to carry the staple. I think we actually got that covered.
Right. Well, it'd be nice. Yeah. Yeah. So this doesn't solve it, but the thing we were referring to, like, smart caching mechanisms and other things solves the real-time problem that I think we were talking about before.
It does, yes.
That it'd be nice to have that public key local to the.
So you want to, yeah, I mean, we could define caches and things, real-time caches these that are, it is, yeah.
Deal with, but we should think about that.
Sure, definitely. And again, there's a modern story in that as well. What a shocker. So what do we do? Well, I mean, I was going to say let's explore both a bit and see which story is better. I'm not hearing a lot of people who want to go to bat for doing this OCSP here. Would anyone like to go to bat for doing this with OCSP here?
I would just note that OCSP does not necessarily imply live OCSP. You could do stapled OCSP at the cost of the sets. It's semantically mostly the same as short-lived certs.
Yeah, I had a couple slides about that.
Yeah, it just depends on like what you want your failure scenario to be.
Yeah.
If the external thing you're relying on goes down, do you want to not have a cert and force your relying parties to give a validity exemption, or do you want to let them just like say I'm not going to worry about replication? Like semantics are mostly the same. It's just like.
Yeah, like I said, we have to do a little work, right? Because we don't actually know how to like do OCSP stapling with SEP. They'd have to like define some new stuff, right?
Yeah, you need a little bit of protocol.
Yeah.
To put a slot, it would be another couple hundred bytes.
Well, like I said, I mean, I'm perfectly content to try both and see what works, but I was actually floating that in terms of, is anybody here saying, does anybody here think that OCSP is better than doing this with short-lived certs with ACME, and that we should, because of that, we definitely need to go down the OCSP path?
Apologize. I mean, no, in fact, I think it's quite the opposite. Even though they might be very similar, or OCSP might be even slightly better, technically speaking, I think from a pragmatic way of what people are willing to implement, you have to implement short-lived cert. You have to implement a lifetime on the certs anyway, and what that lifetime is doesn't change your code. And we just end up with short-lived certs being much easier for people to get their head around and to implement.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think despite my raising all these other options, like I ultimately probably agree.
Yeah, more, right?
Chris went just, if it wasn't obvious already, short-lived search is probably the preference for me.
Okay. Or any other people over on the ATA side who are, I know Mary has an Acme draft now. It's a pretty good indication of where she's thinking. Okay. Oh, great. Why don't we look at Russ's slide? Let's do some real-time protocol design.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's always how you get the real quality stuff.
Yeah, so let's answer. Let's do that first. Okay, sure. So I guess the sense of the room that we want to get is, do people want to proceed with OCSP, short-lived certs, or something else? So if you think that the short-lived certs is the right way forward, hum now. If you think OCSP is the right way forward, hum now. And if you think something else is that we don't know what is the better way forward, hum now. Okay, thank you.
No hums from the Jabber.
Thank you. Okay, so while John was talking, I tried to throw a quick syntax together that would solve what I heard as the evolved requirements. It's one slide.
So you mailed this to the list.
And the guts of the slide I just mailed to the list for the remote attendees because I don't think the one slide has been posted yet.
I'll upload it at the end of the meeting.
Okay. So the part at the top has two pieces, both of which are optional. And the goop under it says one of the optional things must be present or you shouldn't have done this. Okay. So the first part is must include. And so if that is present, you must include IAT, ORIG, DEST, and whatever else is listed there. If it's absent, you still have to include IAT, ORIG, and DEST. Okay, I think that is what I heard as the requirement for the first part. And the alls it is a sequence of IA5 strings that name the claim names that must be present. The second part is the permitted values. If this part is present, it does what the current constraint does. It says the named claim if it is present must contain one of the values listed. So I think that gives us both parts. And what are you shaking at, Jim? Did I screw the syntax up? Because I didn't run it through the compiler.
No, he and I are agreeing on this. Why this is sort of bike shedding, but why IA5 string instead of ASCII string or even UTF-8 string? Why prevent them from using characters we like? Yes, this is bike shedding. It's not about your design.
Because that is what is in the draft that has been through the last call.
Sorry, I didn't know that.
Okay.
I understand, but so that was just a mistake that far. Then this is bike shedding. Don't go there.
Okay, yeah. This is what I was talking about.
Russ,
like a lot of
how
these were
did you
secret.
let IA5 string get this far?
I'll double bike shed. Because we had said earlier that values would be UTF-8, and the second part seems to be about values, not tags.
That's true.
If I did that right.
Yeah, the values do need to be UTF-8. Yeah, so
Right, and that's
I could have screwed.
I see.
That's what I
I see. Okay. So just okay. That's true. Yeah, we do because we do want these values to actually.
is that it would be like a internationalized domain name would be a realistic.
Or even a person's name, a CNAM, right? I mean, we.
Or a company name or something.
Yeah. We want these to actually be internationalizable. Yeah.
Well, that's the biggest change we've made all day.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay.
Because the current document says I5. Does anyone think we should preserve the IA5 as opposed to moves to
Well,
UTF-8?
we need the I5 to be in the header. When you say the I5, we need the, so the
Yeah,
I5 string needs to be there for what the header name is, right? The claim name is.
Yes, the claim name would remain IA5
Just the
string.
value.
The permitted values in the current document are IA5 string as well, and the proposal is to make them UTF-8.
They need to be UTF-8, yes.
And never mind what the format of the strings is. The overall proposal is, I liked it. As everyone else likes it, we're good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to get there for you, Pete.
Okay. Good. One last thing for me, and then we can do whatever else we need to do here. So people keep telling me that we need a way to do CNAM and to do diversion for call forwarding in this. I have some drafts about this. They have not generated a ton of list discussion, but if regulators and people like that are saying that we need them, we should probably do them. So, I'd like, I mean, I think we're gonna have some kind of charter-ish discussion here in a minute. The charter's old, the milestones are really old. There's things in the milestones that like we said we were gonna do that we never did and stuff like that. I think we should adopt some stuff like this and do whatever process structures are required to get these things adopted because people seem to need them.
Chris went +1 to that, where we also feel those are important in the ATIS community.
Yeah.
And myself personally as well.
Yeah. These two are no-brainers, right? I mean, we just need to have these things, and everybody's asking us why we didn't put them in the base, right? So, I mean, okay, we'll put them in. Anybody think these are terrible ideas? We shouldn't do it? Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, 1 second. So we had at the end of the our working group session in Seoul agreement in the room that we should add milestones towards approaching a piece of what John was talking about earlier, exploring the integration of ACME and STIR. And the conversation today reinforced that there is appetite in the room to work on that problem. Any comments on that? Anybody want to rush to the mic? And all right, so we also had agreement at that time to add whatever we needed to do to the charter, be it milestones or text, that this group would work on passport extensions. We've reviewed the charter in between, and we believe that we can do that just with milestones, that we don't need to do charter text surgery to do the passport extension stuff. So it's our intent to just start to work with the ADs to lay down milestones to do passport extensions as they come up. John just proposed a couple that there seems to be energy to work on, interest on taking on. Does anybody here have a problem if we approach the ADs about dropping in milestones for these two particular extensions? If you think this is a good idea, let me just go ahead and turn this into a sense of the room hum. If you think it's a good idea, we start working on this as a group, hum now. If you think we shouldn't, hum now. So we will work with the ADs to straighten out the milestones, get rid of the cruft, add what we just talked about. If you don't see that happen in the next, 2 or 3 weeks, please make some noise on the list. So
Let's talk about the cruft. One of the cruft pieces that I never started writing about anyway, was like a privacy analysis draft for this. I think that that was put on our plate, I think by the ADs at the time that we chartered. It was like, this looks like the kind of things I'm going to do privacy analysis of. I might suggest that we just try to find somebody to look at this, to do that. I have a couple people I might suggest for that. So, so rather
than strike it,
the cruft,
right?
Maybe that's something I can, because look at the stuff that Stephen was talking about, right?
Sure.
We came out of this, so I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't think I'm the person to do it because I've been doing all the rest of it, right? Somebody who isn't me should say whether or not this is actually has a privacy story. So let's find somebody and actually get it done.
All right.
In the spirit of things that you might want to do, recently there's been a lot of interest or concern, I should say, about emergency call spoofing issues, location spoofing, and obviously other related things, but primarily location spoofing, particularly as MG1 starting to take off. So I wonder if there's any interest in discussing that today, or at some point, and possibly so people might be interested in looking at how we can solve our old location signing or location trust problem that we have explored without much really, with more than, well, life is tough type of thing in this context, so that you have provider-signed location that would provide at least some alternate approximate location for the purported emergency caller. So I'm curious if there's any interest in pursuing that.
Yeah, definitely, John. Again, I think we looked at this a little bit, and yeah, this is the classic case where I think you could do a passport extension, probably be a more structured extension, right? That would allow you to capture the necessary location fields and so on. But I think similar to the CNAM, I can imagine it in the way that you actually read the CNAM draft. There's kind of a first and third party story. In other words, there's a story for how you generate the passport object when first party is attesting the color name, and then there's a way to do it as well for like a third party attestation to generate a passport for that. I think location should be very similar, right? You probably have both. So you've got like a list or something that's offline. Do you want to have the generating the third party attestation? So I think it would be pretty straightforward to do.
Chris, yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I have another issue that we're starting to look at that I think might be valuable. Just wanted to get some feedback on it. It is more service provider specific, but it's the problem of validating a service provider validating telephone numbers coming from the customers that are known by the service provider themselves and providing credentials. So I may provide some text on that. Good question, but I just want to. Yeah, I'm actually thinking using identity header and swapping some mechanism like that. But
no, actually it does. I think Henning, I'd be interested to look at that emergency. So, be willing to work with.
All right. When we chartered this working group, we identified a couple of large chunks of work that we would want to attack. And we had in the charter text a strict ordering on them, the in-band and the out-of-band. In-band has been shipped out of the group, modulo the small things that we've been talking about. Out-of-band still stands in front of us. Who's going to be working on it? Can I get a show of hands for people who are willing to attack out-of-band at this point?
Once JSIP's done, which it is.
Awesome.
I'd also like to suggest that scheduling skins quick has deprived us of a couple of the people whose hands
would have raised. Yes, definitely. So yeah, that was an unfortunate conflict, but we couldn't argue that it was a fatal conflict. So here we are. Some of Ecker in particular was a major contributor to that. He is now very busy. If you believe you have interest in cycles and are willing to take on being a driver in the form of a document editor, perhaps, I would very much like to hear from you. Yep, we've got a document started already.
We do have a document, and yes, Ecker and I are writing it, if I recall. So, and this stuff hopefully is off my plate pretty much now, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, if you're willing to continue on, but I would like to,
So
we keep putting so much on your shoulders, man. So.
I mean, I think that these little passport extension things. These are not like going to be a big deal, I think. No, I think this is the main part of the work we have left, right, is to do out of band. There are technical problems in that we don't know how to solve. What we need realistically, is an interim, right, at least a virtual interim, to actually dig into this for a day between now and summer. And I think we do that, we'll come out of that with, I think, in pretty good shape to have a good preso on that. Obviously, I think we have some of the acting parts of that. We're understanding better at this point. Still a lot of it we don't get, but I mean, a lot was blocking, frankly, on the basic stuff in certs being stable. Like the amount of churn that we did to certs in the last 4 months through this. I mean, it's been tough for where we're going to go forward on that. So I think we understand better now where we need to get to on it. So I'd like to suggest we have some kind of interim thing and dig right into that advanced stuff. Boom. June sounds like a time farther in the future than May. That's usually good.
Shoot for something in June. I believe we've exhausted what we had on the plate for today. Unless somebody runs to the mic, I'm going to declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your time investment. You've got a little bit of time between now and any lunch meetings you might have. If anybody wants to get together and move some of the things that we just talked about forward, please do.
Yep.